My car died on a dark highway, and everything after that night changed forever. Rain hammered the windshield when headlights suddenly appeared behind me. A stranger's porch light became my only hope that night. She opened the door and said, "You're safe now." I didn't know her name, but my heart already knew something. 3 days later, I still hadn't left her house. Then a knock came, and my old life found me again. My name is Sarah Mitchell, 29 years old, a marketing coordinator from Columbus, Ohio. Driving home from a work conference when disaster struck. I had spent years hiding who I truly was, terrified of disappointing my father, a respected pastor in our small church community back home. The check engine light flickered before my car sputtered and died completely, stranding me on Interstate 70 somewhere between Columbus and Pittsburgh. No cell signal, no gas station in sight, just endless dark fields and rain pounding against my windshield like an omen of trouble. I spotted a single light glowing through the trees and decided walking there was safer than waiting alone on the shoulder. A woman opened the farmhouse door before I even knocked, as if she'd been watching the storm roll toward her land. "You look like a drowned cat," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Her voice warmed despite the stranger standing dripping on her porch. Her name was Jordan Hayes, and she ran the small auto repair shop in town along with her family's old farm. Jordan handed me a towel and dry clothes without asking questions, treating my sudden intrusion like an ordinary Tuesday evening. The storm knocked out phone lines across the county, meaning no tow truck could reach my car until morning at the earliest. We sat by her fireplace eating leftover stew, and I found myself talking more freely than I had in years. Jordan laughed easily, her hazel eyes crinkling, and something in my chest loosened that had been tight for a very long time. By midnight, the storm hadn't let up, and Jordan offered me the guest room without a hint of hesitation or discomfort. Lying in an unfamiliar bed, I realized I wasn't thinking about my broken car at all, only about her laugh. Morning came, but the roads remained flooded, and the tow truck company said it would be days before anyone could reach my car. Jordan didn't seem to mind my extended stay, insisting I help her feed the chickens instead of moping about my ruined weekend plans. We fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings in the barn, afternoons fixing fences, evenings trading stories over coffee that never quite went cold. I learned Jordan had taken over the farm after her mother passed, choosing quiet fields over the city life she once dreamed about. She learned I'd built a career in Columbus chasing promotions I didn't actually want, just to make my father proud of me. Neither of us mentioned relationships, though I noticed Jordan wore no ring and never once brought up a boyfriend or husband. On the third day, my car finally got towed to her shop, but somehow I still hadn't packed my bags to leave. "Stay for dinner," Jordan said, and I told myself it was only politeness, though my heart argued otherwise the whole evening. We drove into town for parts, and I watched how everyone greeted her, warm but careful, like there was history I didn't understand yet. A woman named Denise stared at us a little too long outside the diner, and Jordan's jaw tightened before she looked away. That night Jordan told me about Claire, her fiancé years ago, who left town rather than face what people would say about them. I sat frozen, realizing Jordan wasn't just a kind stranger. She was someone who understood exactly what I'd spent my life running from. "I stopped hiding after that," Jordan said quietly, "even if it cost me half the town's business at my shop." Something about her courage terrified and thrilled me at once. Like standing at the edge of a cliff I'd always refused to look over. My car was finally repaired, the mechanic said, ready to drive home whenever I wanted, and yet I lingered another full day. Jordan caught me staring at her hands while she worked on the tractor engine, and neither of us looked away fast enough. "You should probably head home," she said, though her voice carried none of the urgency her words suggested. I told my boss I needed a few more personal days, inventing excuses about car trouble that weren't entirely lies anymore. We hiked to the ridge above her property, and Jordan pointed out constellations while I pretended to care about anything but her voice. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my father asking why I hadn't called. but I let it sit silent in my pocket. One evening, our hands brushed passing a mug of coffee, and neither of us pulled away as quickly as we should have. I haven't felt this normal in months, I admitted, surprising myself with how easily the truth slipped out around her. Jordan smiled the way people smile when they're trying hard not to hope for something they're afraid to name. We spent an entire afternoon painting her weathered barn door, laughing so hard I nearly toppled off the ladder twice. That night, sitting on her porch steps, our shoulders touched, and the silence between us felt louder than any conversation. I like who I am when I'm around you, I whispered, immediately embarrassed by how vulnerable the words made me feel. Jordan turned to look at me, her expression soft, and for one breathless second I thought she might lean in and kiss me. A truck horn blared from the road, breaking the moment, and we both laughed nervously, pretending nothing had almost happened. I finally drove back to Columbus the next morning, promising to call. Though leaving felt like tearing something loose inside my chest, the apartment I'd once loved suddenly felt hollow, every wall reminding me of how quiet my life had become without her voice. We started talking every night, hours passing like minutes, our conversations stretching from silly memories to fears we'd never told anyone. My father called to ask when I'd bring home a nice young man, and I changed the subject before my voice could betray me. 3 weeks later, I invented a work trip to Pittsburgh, just so I could drive the extra 2 hours to see Jordan again. She was waiting on her porch when I arrived, and the hug we shared lasted far longer than any friendly greeting should. I missed you, Jordan said against my shoulder, and I felt the words settle somewhere deep and unguarded inside me. That weekend, we walked hand in hand through her orchard, and for the first time, I stopped worrying about who might see. Under the apple trees, Jordan finally kissed me, gentle and searching, like she'd been waiting to ask permission for weeks. I kissed her back without hesitation, every fear I'd carried for years suddenly quieter than the sound of my own heartbeat. I've never felt this sure about anyone, I told her, and she pressed her forehead to mine, smiling like sunlight breaking through clouds. We started planning visits every other weekend, splitting the distance between Columbus and her small Pennsylvania town like a secret ritual. I told no one about her yet, savoring the privacy of something so new, so fragile, so entirely mine to protect. Jordan never pushed me to say more than I was ready to, patient in a way no one in my life had ever been. On my drives home, I caught myself smiling at red lights, replaying her laugh until the sound felt permanently stitched into my memory. My best friend Nicole noticed the change first, asking pointedly who had me smiling at my phone during lunch meetings. I told her everything, terrified of judgment, but Nicole just hugged me and said she'd wondered for years when I'd finally be happy. Emboldened, I started imagining a future where Jordan and I didn't have to hide behind highway visits and late-night phone calls. Jordan mentioned, half joking, that her farmhouse had plenty of room if I ever wanted more than weekend visits. The idea terrified me and thrilled me equally, uprooting the career and family expectations I'd spent a lifetime building. Still, every mile back to Columbus felt heavier than the last, my real life slowly starting to feel like the temporary one. I didn't know it yet, but my father had already heard rumors, and everything was about to become far more complicated. My father called on a Tuesday night, his voice tight, asking if it was true that I was involved with a woman in Pennsylvania. Someone from church, a cousin of Denise, had seen us together at the diner and spread the story through our entire congregation. I froze on the phone, unable to lie but too afraid to fully admit what Jordan meant to me. "This isn't who we raised you to be," my father said, his words landing like stones dropped straight into my chest. My mother stayed silent on the call, and that silence hurt almost worse than my father's anger ever could. I hung up shaking, unsure whether to call Jordan or crawl into bed and pretend the conversation never happened. When I finally called her, my voice cracked telling Jordan what my father had said, and she went quiet on the other end. "I know exactly how that feels," Jordan said softly. remembering her own family's reaction years earlier when she came out. Her older brother Mark had stopped speaking to her after Claire left, blaming Jordan for scandal that supposedly ruined the family's reputation in town. I hadn't realized how much history haunted that farmhouse. How many people still whispered about Jordan whenever she walked into the hardware store. My boss called me into his office, mentioning concerns about my judgment after a client complained about rumors circulating in our small industry circle. I realized then that hiding hadn't protected me at all. It had only delayed the moment everything would collide at once. Nicole warned me that some coworkers were gossiping, and I started dreading Monday meetings, scanning faces for judgment I couldn't always identify. I drove to see Jordan that weekend needing comfort, but found her distant, distracted by problems of her own I didn't yet understand. Her brother Mark had shown up demanding she sell part of the family land to cover unpaid loans from their late father's debts. "He wants me gone," Jordan admitted, staring at old paperwork spread across her kitchen table like evidence of a losing battle. I offered to help however I could, but Jordan pulled back, insisting this was her burden alone to carry. "You have enough trouble with your own family," she said, and for the first time, distance crept quietly between us. I returned to Columbus feeling like I'd failed her somehow, unable to fix either of our unraveling situations. My father requested a meeting, sitting me down at the same table where he'd once taught me to pray before dinner. "I love you," he said, "but I don't know how to reconcile this with everything I believe." I told him I hadn't chosen this to hurt him, that Jordan made me feel more like myself than anything ever had. He asked me to give it time, to not rush into decisions that could permanently damage my standing in the community. I left his house with no resolution, only a hollow ache in my mother's unreadable expression following me to the car. Weeks passed with fewer calls between Jordan and me, both of us drowning separately in family pressure neither could easily explain. Then Nicole sent me a photo from a mutual friend's social media, Jordan standing close to a woman I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped, jealousy and fear tangling together as old insecurities about being someone's rebound resurfaced all at once. "Called Jordan," my voice sharper than intended, demanding to know who the woman in the photo was. "That's Claire," Jordan said flatly. "She came back into town because her mother is sick. Nothing more than that." I didn't fully believe her. Old wounds about hiding and shame making me suspicious of everything I couldn't personally witness. We argued, both exhausted and raw, saying things neither of us truly meant but couldn't quite take back. "Maybe this was always going to be too complicated," I said, immediately regretting how final the words sounded once spoken aloud. Jordan went quiet, then simply said, "Maybe you're right," before the line disconnected between us. For 2 weeks, neither of us called, both too proud and too hurt to be the one who broke the silence first. My father, sensing my distraction, softened slightly, though his question still circled cautiously around whether I'd moved on. I nearly told him yes, just to end the tension, but the lie tasted worse than the truth I was avoiding. Nicole finally confronted me, asking why I was letting fear destroy the first relationship that had ever made me genuinely happy. I admitted I missed Jordan desperately, that the silence between us felt like losing a limb I hadn't known I depended on. Meanwhile, Claire had reached out to Jordan, not for romance, but to apologize for how she'd left things all those years ago. Jordan told her she'd already moved forward, that someone new had shown her what real honesty and love actually felt like. But by then, Jordan didn't know if that someone still wanted her. Given how badly our last conversation had ended, Mark pressed harder about selling the farm, threatening legal action if Jordan didn't agree to his terms within 30 days. Isolated and overwhelmed, Jordan started seriously considering leaving town altogether, farm and all, just to escape the constant pressure surrounding her. I found out through Nicole, who'd heard from a friend that Jordan's shop had a for sale sign posted out front. Panic hit me instantly, the thought of losing her permanently outweighing every fear I'd been clinging to for weeks. I called her immediately, but the number rang and rang. No answer. No voicemail greeting I recognized anymore. My father, of all people, noticed my distress and asked plainly, "Is this about her?" The woman from Pennsylvania. I broke down and told him everything, terrified but unable to keep pretending my feelings for Jordan away any longer. To my shock, he sat quietly, then said, "Your grandmother would have understood this better than either of us." That single sentence cracked something open in me, a door to a family history I never knew existed. My father explained that his own mother, my grandmother Ruth, had loved a woman named Eleanor decades ago, hidden away in old letters he'd found years ago. He'd never known how to bring it up, ashamed of his own confusion and the rigid beliefs he'd inherited from his own father. "I buried those letters instead of asking questions," he admitted, "and I've regretted staying silent about it for years." Hearing this rewrote everything I thought I knew about my family, about the silence that had shaped generations before me. My father handed me a small wooden box containing faded letters, Ruth's careful handwriting describing love she was never allowed to keep. Reading them, I recognized my own fear reflected across decades. The same shame passed quietly from mother to son to daughter. "I don't want you to end up like her," my father said, voice breaking. "Alone. Hiding. Wondering what could have been." For the first time, he hugged me without hesitation, apologizing for every silence that had made me feel unwelcome in my own life. I left his house that night with clarity I hadn't felt in months, determined to fix things with Jordan before it was too late. I drove straight to Pennsylvania, arriving well after midnight, only to find her farmhouse dark and a moving truck parked in the driveway. My heart pounded as I knocked, praying she hadn't already left, praying I wasn't too late to say everything I needed to say. Jordan opened the door, exhausted and surprised, clearly not expecting me standing there soaked from an unexpected midnight rainstorm again. "I'm not selling," she said before I could speak. "I decided this morning. I'm not letting Mark scare me off my own land." Relief flooded through me, followed instantly by the harder truth I still needed to say aloud after weeks of silence. "I'm sorry," I told her. "I let fear make me cruel to the one person who never once made me feel ashamed." Jordan studied me carefully, arms crossed, clearly guarding herself against getting hurt the same way twice in one lifetime. I told her about my father, about Ruth's letters, about finally understanding why I'd been so terrified of losing everything at once. Something in her expression softened, though she still hesitated, unwilling to simply forget the pain of weeks apart. "I need to know this isn't just panic talking," she said. "I can't keep losing people every time things get hard." I promised her it wasn't panic, that I'd never felt more certain about anything than I did standing on her porch that night. We talked until sunrise, untangling every misunderstanding, every assumption, every fear neither of us had voiced honestly enough before. Jordan admitted Claire's visit had only been about apologizing, nothing romantic, and she regretted not explaining that more clearly at the time. I admitted my jealousy had come from old wounds, from years spent believing I wasn't worthy of someone choosing me completely. By morning, exhausted but lighter, we agreed to stop letting other people's opinions dictate decisions that belonged only to us. Mark showed up unannounced that same morning, furious to find me there, assuming I was somehow responsible for Jordan's refusal to sell. "This is none of your business," he snapped at me, and Jordan stepped between us, firmer than I'd ever seen her. "She has more business here than you do lately," Jordan told him. "You've barely visited since Dad's funeral, and now you want cash." Mark's face reddened, but for once he didn't have a quick retort, just silence and the slow realization he'd overplayed his hand. "I'm not selling the farm, and I'm not hiding who I love anymore either," Jordan said, glancing at me with quiet determination. Mark left without another word, slamming his truck door, though something in his expression suggested this wasn't entirely finished yet. That afternoon, Jordan called a lawyer to formally settle the loan dispute without surrendering any of the family land to her brother. I offered to help cover part of the debt using savings I'd set aside for an apartment down payment I no longer wanted. "You don't have to do that," Jordan said. But I insisted, telling her some things mattered more than square footage in Columbus. Together we drafted a plan, refinancing part of the farm instead of selling it outright, buying Jordan time to stabilize everything. With the immediate crisis handled, we finally had space to breathe, to imagine a future without constant emergencies interrupting every conversation. I called my manager and requested a transfer to the Pittsburgh office, closer to Jordan, closer to the life I actually wanted. My father, surprising me again, offered to help me move, insisting on driving the truck himself despite my mother's lingering discomfort. "She still needs time," he said about my mother, "but she loves you. And eventually that will matter more than her fear." I packed up my Columbus apartment slowly, saying goodbye to a life that had never quite fit me the way Jordan's farmhouse did. Nicole helped me load boxes, crying and laughing simultaneously, promising to visit constantly once I officially relocated to Pennsylvania. The drive to Jordan's felt different this time. No rainstorm, no fear. Just quiet certainty settling comfortably into my chest. Jordan met me in the driveway, and for the first time, I wasn't a stranger seeking shelter. I was simply coming home. We spent the next week settling into a shared rhythm, my belongings slowly blending into her farmhouse like they'd always belonged there. Word spread through town anyway. Some neighbors colder, others surprisingly kind, including an elderly woman who'd known Jordan's mother for decades. "Your mother would be proud," the woman told Jordan one afternoon. "She always said love shouldn't have conditions attached to it." Slowly, Jordan's shop regained customers, some driven by curiosity, others simply tired of small-town gossip overshadowing good, honest work. My mother finally called, hesitant but genuine, asking to meet Jordan properly instead of only hearing rumors secondhand from church friends. The visit was awkward but hopeful. My mother's questions careful, Jordan's patience unwavering, both women slowly finding common ground over coffee. By the time my mother left, she hugged Jordan goodbye, a small gesture that meant more than any words could have. Just as everything finally felt settled, Mark returned one final time, and this visit would test everything we built. Mark arrived pale and shaking, admitting through gritted teeth that his daughter needed expensive surgery he couldn't otherwise afford. "I didn't know how else to get the money," he confessed. "Selling the farm felt like the only option left available to me." Jordan's anger melted into something softer, realizing her brother's desperation had never truly been about spite or old grudges after all. "Why didn't you just tell me?" Jordan asked. And Mark admitted pride had kept him from asking his estranged sister for help. Together, we sat down and calculated what the farm could reasonably spare without forcing anyone to sell their entire inheritance away. I offered additional savings again, and this time Jordan accepted, insisting we'd figure out repayment together as a family, not a transaction. Mark broke down crying, apologizing not just for the money but for years of silence following Claire's departure long ago. "I was scared what people would think of me too," he admitted. "Having a gay sister felt like something I had to hide." Jordan forgave him slowly, cautiously, but genuinely, recognizing shared fear rather than cruelty had driven his behavior all along. That night, the three of us ate dinner together for the first time in years. Awkward but undeniably, hopefully, a beginning. Word of the reconciliation spread through town almost as quickly as the earlier gossip had, softening opinions neighbors once held firmly. The local diner owner, previously distant, started greeting us warmly, mentioning her own niece who'd recently come out to relieved acceptance. Slowly, painfully, the town shifted, not entirely, but enough that walking down Main Street no longer felt like running a gauntlet. My father visited for Thanksgiving, sitting at Jordan's table, saying grace over a meal that included the woman his daughter loved. He raised his glass afterward, voice unsteady, and toasted family, in all the forms it decides to take. I caught Jordan's eye across the table, both of us blinking back tears neither wanted to explain to the rest of the family. That winter, Jordan proposed during a snowstorm eerily similar to the night we first met, kneeling in the same farmhouse doorway. "You gave me shelter when I had nowhere else to go," I said through tears. "Now let me stay for good." I said yes before she even finished asking, laughing through tears at how perfectly the moment mirrored where our story began. We planned a small wedding in the orchard where we'd shared our first kiss, inviting only the people who truly mattered. My mother cried through the entire ceremony, finally whispering afterward that she wished she'd understood sooner how happy I could be. Nicole stood beside me as maid of honor, and even Mark showed up, his daughter recovering well after her successful surgery. Claire sent flowers with a note wishing us happiness, closing an old chapter with unexpected grace neither of us had anticipated. The elderly neighbor who'd known Jordan's mother attended too, saying softly that this was exactly the ending that farmhouse deserved. I thought of my grandmother Ruth often that day, wishing she could have known love without having to hide it away. My father read one of Ruth's old letters aloud during the ceremony, finally giving her hidden love the recognition it deserved decades later. There wasn't a dry eye left as he finished, understanding settling over everyone that history doesn't have to keep repeating its silence. Jordan and I danced under string lights strung between apple trees, exactly where everything between us had truly begun. The farm thrived that following spring, Jordan's shop busier than ever, our combined savings slowly restoring what Mark's debts had threatened. I found work at a small marketing firm in Pittsburgh, finally building a career that felt like mine instead of my father's expectations. Sundays became family dinners at the farmhouse. My parents, Mark and his daughter, Nicole whenever she visited, all gathered around one table. The town never became perfect. Some doors remained quietly closed, but the ones that mattered most had opened wide enough. I sometimes drove past the exact spot on the highway where my car had broken down that very first stormy night. It always struck me how one small disaster had somehow led me directly toward the truest, safest home I'd ever known. Jordan liked to joke that she should thank whoever built that faulty stretch of highway for bringing me straight to her door. I told her it wasn't the highway, it was courage. Hers first, then eventually mine. That had truly brought us together. Looking back, every hardship, every fear, every whispered rumor had only proven how strong our love was capable of becoming. 2 years later, sitting on that same porch where she once called me a drowned cat, I finally felt completely, unapologetically home. Whatever storms still came, I knew now I'd never have to face them without Jordan's hand steady in mine again. Fendi.